Like You and Extra Mile Arena, welcoming English pop rock band 1975, performing on their still at their very best North American tour. Monday, November 27th at Extra Mile Arena. Doors open at 6:30 p.m. Tickets and information available online at Ticketmaster.com.
This is Fresh Air. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with jazz musicians John Eric Kelso, who plays trumpet, and Matt Munisteri, who plays guitar. They have a new album with their band, The Irregulars. It's called Live at the Ear Inn. You can find the band every Sunday night at the very old West Village bar, The Ear Inn. Matt, when we were sort of trading emails talking about doing this interview, you wrote something that I wanted to talk about. You said, "The tradition of collective improvisation is central to the Irregulars, and the role of the trumpet is decisive in any successful performance in the style. John is a master of shepherding the structure and feel of each performance through his musical cues. Some of this language is well-established tradition, but some is derived from John's personal vocabulary." Can you talk a little bit about what those cues are, like how that works on the stage?
I started playing with John in '96, I think. Occasionally we would play in the same bands. And then I started having John on some of my own gigs when I was leading, again in the '90s. And I'll just say one thing that happens sometimes with John is, even if there's another leader, John will expect that like people are going to follow the trumpet. So I wasn't familiar when we started playing together with sort of the trumpet's role in traditional jazz and how the trumpet really determines the structure of a tune. And I was like, no, I'm determining the structure because I'm the singer and I'm telling you what's going to happen on stage. And he'd be like, no. And sometimes there'd be train wrecks that would happen in this other band that we played, and John would get really mad and just be like, listen to the trumpet. And I was like, well, dude, you're not telling us what to do. But, you know, the truth is, he's right. Like, once you understand that it is a language and that the trumpet is actually, if it's played correctly in this style of music, it's giving all the information that you need to be able to follow along. I know his vocabulary and his repertoire very well. If I'm listening to the radio and John's even like in a band somewhere in the mix, I can pick out his sound. Like any soloist that I love, any jazz musician that I love, if I'm listening to a record and suddenly that soloist comes on, it's like a good friend just walked into the room. And so I feel like that's what I meant by the combination of stuff that's like very traditional and established, and then your own really sort of unique sense of play and your own cues that we all know.
Well, John, can you give an example of a cue that you might give to the other horn players?
Yeah, one of the ways I describe it to people when they ask about this stuff is I say that by default, often the trumpet player in certain styles of jazz bands is like the traffic cop or like the quarterback. I like the traffic cop analogy in that the trumpet kind of directs the order of the solos sometimes, or he will cue how many ensemble choruses are in the beginning or in the middle or at the end. He's often the one that will initiate improvised background figures or riffs, and you have to do it in a way that the others, first of all, know that you're trying to get their attention, and then play something clear that they can latch onto, and that lends itself to either harmonization or whatever it is you're going for. And also with the endings, often the trumpet will kind of lead which type of ending, whether there's a tag at the end or whether there's a retard where it slows down and there's a hold, or that kind of thing. And also with the dynamics as well, whether you're going to play the loud one and then a soft one and the medium one. Sometimes we'll do things like that and hope that people are paying attention so that you're all on the same page.
You're playing a lot of music from the 20s and 30s. This is called usually traditional jazz, but sometimes I think the word traditional gives the wrong impression. It's going to be like a museum piece. But you're not playing staid or boring music, as listeners can hear. Like, this is really vibrant and exciting. But you're also, it sounds to me like you're being respectful of the era that the music comes from. Can you just talk a little bit about finding that balance?
Oh, sure. I think the way we've come to a sort of a style of our own at the Ear Inn is a mixture of a respect for the style and knowledge of the earlier styles of New Orleans jazz, for lack of a better term for it. And
The terminology is tricky.
yeah, it's certain words upset people, but anyway. So we come from this place of knowledge of the earlier styles of jazz, and then we also are open-minded and kind of find our happy medium with whoever is in the quartet du jour there.
Because that changes the dynamics on how you play.
Yeah,
Oh,
depending on who the other guys are, it may lean a little bit more towards swing, may lean a little bit more towards New Orleans, maybe a little beboppy, and some versions of the quartet are more adventurous as far as it can kind of go almost anywhere, and I don't try to rein anybody in as far as stylistically there.
It's also, like you said, really dependent on the individual voices. Each of the players, the horn players on that CD, Scott Robinson and Evan Christopher and Jay Ratman, and of course John Allred on trombone, are all like fully formed, strong musical personalities, who've likewise digested a great deal of music. And so things happen, when all those personalities come together and everyone's being honest and had a drink maybe or two.
It is a bar.
It is a bar after all, yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. That's Matt Munisteri and John Eric Kelso, founding members of the jazz band The Irregulars. They have a new album out called Live at the Ear Inn. We'll hear more from them after a break. I'm Sam Brigger, and this is Fresh Air.
Our Family Foundation supports WHYY's Fresh Air and its commitment to sharing ideas and encouraging meaningful conversation. Support for NPR comes from this station and from Columbia Pictures and Apple Original Films presenting Napoleon. Directed by Ridley Scott and starring Joaquin Phoenix, Napoleon tells the story of Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to power, now playing exclusively in theaters. And from the law firm Cooley LLP, with offices in the U.S., Europe, and Asia, Cooley advises entrepreneurs, investors, financial institutions, and established companies around the world where innovation meets the law.
On the 60th anniversary of President John F. Kennedy's assassination, we hear from a Secret Service agent who was there that day.
Before Dallas, I was known as, I was Clint Hill. After that, I've been known as the man who climbed onto the president's car.
That story from Radio Diaries on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 on Boise State Public Radio News.
The service, along with our music and jazz stations streaming at boisestatepublicradio.org. Support comes from Cottonwood Grill, offering private event spaces for holiday parties, birthday gatherings, weddings, and other special occasions. Information available from Cottonwood's on-site event planner at 208-333-1417 or by email at groups@cottonwoodgrill.com. Always good, always Cottonwood.
This is Fresh Air. I'm Sam Brigger. My guests are the founding members of the traditional jazz band The Irregulars, John Eric Kelso and Matt Munisteri, who play trumpet and guitar respectively. They play Sunday nights at the New York bar in the West Village called the Ear Inn, hence the band's name. Don't let the word traditional fool you into believing that this is some sort of nostalgia act. Although the songs they play are old, a lot of them from the 20s and 30s, their performances are as exciting and lively as anything out there. They have a new album. It's called Live at the Ear Inn. They brought their instruments to the studio. Let's hear a song they played for us that's not on the new album. It's called Tishomingo Blues, written by Spencer Williams in 1917. Tishomingo Blues, played by trumpeter John Eric Kelso and Matt Munisteri on guitar. They're here because they have a new CD with their band, The Irregulars. It's called Live at the Ear Inn. That was really wonderful. Thank you for playing that. I think it's perhaps time to talk about Mutes. Hearing that song.
Don't reach for that dial.
Mutes? What?
So
You want to set the mute button on the
Yeah.
on our?
Next we're going to be talking about mimes.
Trumpet players like to accessorize, isn't that right, John? You have all sorts of things you stick at the end of your trumpet.
Oh yes, yes. This is a fetish for trumpet players, and for me it started pretty much right when I started playing trumpet at age 10. I was listening to my parents' old 78 RPM records from the swing era, and immediately it caught my ear. Guys like Cootie Williams with the Duke Ellington Band and with the Benny Goodman small bands, that he was using a plunger and making these kind of growling sounds and wah-wah sounds, and that thrilled me to no end.
Like an actual plunger, like a toilet plunger, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like we like to call them sink plungers, mostly, Mostly the trumpet uses the smaller.
I'm hoping they're not used whether they're sink or toilet plungers.
Nah, yeah. Maybe I'll demonstrate the little pixie mute by itself and with the plunger and without the pixie mute, just so you understand what that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Would that be good? Okay. All right. So this is playing with just the pixie mute. Okay. So now this is with the pixie mute and the sink plunger. So you get the idea of how you get some different tonal sounds that way. Oh, and the plunger without the pixie.
That's really cool. Well, thanks for doing that.
Sure.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about how each of you got started. John, I'd like to start with you. You grew up in Detroit, right? What was your family like? What was your house like there?
Well, I grew up in a suburb of Detroit, yes, called Allen Park, and I had a brother and a sister, and my mom and dad. My dad had played trumpet when he was young, and it was interesting because I didn't know that until after I told him that I wanted to play the trumpet. He said, "Oh, really? You want to play the trumpet? Let me see if I can find mine." So he dug out his horn, and he was my first teacher, and he sounded kind of like Harry James, who was his big idol. And around the same time, at age 10, I was finding my parents' old records, these 78 RPM records from the swing era. So I got interested in that style of music at a very young age, and had a buddy that lived near me who was doing the same thing. And we actually formed a big band when we were still in elementary school. On our own, we put together a big band with ringers from the junior high band.
And would you gig?
We played at the school concerts, and we played at we did some things like at the PTA meetings and stuff like that.
And was there a point where you sort of realized, like, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this, maybe better than some of my peers, and maybe I want to make a run at being a musician?
I think in a way, yes. I mean, I always was driven. I just wanted to be really good. Like, I couldn't stand not sounding good, so I practiced incessantly when I was young. I was just the band teacher in elementary school would have us fill out this little charts of how many minutes we practiced each day, and then our parents would have to initial it and bring it in, and I would bring mine in, and he actually called my mother and he said, "John Eric is making things up. He's lying. He's saying he practiced 240 minutes on Saturday." No, that's right. That's right. They had to tell me to stop practicing because it was getting late.
When did you start gigging? How old were you?
My first paying gig, I was 12, actually.
Wow.
And then my first steady gig for 2 summers when I was in junior high, and also the summer before going into high school, I had a steady gig playing at Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan, part of the Henry Ford Museum, with that same buddy of mine, Mike Karub, and we had a little trad jazz band playing outside there 6 days a week, 5 hours a day. So that was a good chance to learn some songs and get some chops.
Yeah. And then when did you decide to move to New York?
1989. I was 25 years old, and I got called by Vince Giordano of the Nighthawks, and he was looking for somebody to join the band, and he flew me out to New York, and I played with the group for a week. And oddly, the same month I had a call from a band called the Dukes of Dixieland in New Orleans, and they flew me down there for a week, and all this happened in 1 month in 1989. And I got offered both gigs, and those were my 2 favorite cities in the world that I had been to, so it was a pretty exciting